And we're live. Welcome, everyone, back to the future. We're here in 2023. Who would have thought that,
Yeah.
you know, time would stretch on? It has been stretching on in the past up until this point,
Mhm.
and I guess it would be a thing to think it'll continue to stretch on, but we can't say that for sure. Lights can turn off tomorrow and
Mhm.
on the planet,
Yeah.
and it's all. I mean, I don't want to be ominous at this point. I don't know. I don't know why I went in that direction, but anyways, welcome to 2023.
Really? And a thought occurred to me earlier as we're sitting here, and I'm like, man, 2023, 2023. Before you even joined in here in the green room, that means that starting January 1st, all the kids that were born in 2010 officially become teenagers. They
Okay.
start becoming officially teenagers this year. And it's like, holy hell. Because, uh, a product of the 60s and 70s, anything 2000, any date in 2000 was a science fiction movie. 2001 A Space Odyssey, then 2010 came along. All of this stuff sounds like, you know, science fiction titles to me. And here we are, 2023. Holy hell.
1900s seemed like something, but these are only perceptions. But it seemed like
Sure.
something. It did seem to me 1900s was something colloquial to our existence, which it actually was in a sense,
Hmm.
and that 2000 seemed like a great departure. So even for
Yeah.
me growing up, in the late turn of the century, or that's how would you say it, the late 19, 21st, the late
20th
20th
century.
century.
Yeah.
Um, it still felt like a great departure. The actual changing of the guard with the now 2000s.
Yeah. And now we're in the 2020s. I mean, it's just holy hell.
We're in the beginning of the 2020s. It's an incredible. Well, we're 3 years into the
Hmm.
2020s. But the problem with with the 1900s. So okay, if we were back in the 1900s, we'd say things like, dude, the 70s, man, or dude, the 80s was wild, or
Hmm.
dude, we're in the 90s now. We got one more decade to go and then we're in 2000. How weird. Um or you could say that the 30s, man, we're in the 1910s, or whatever.
Hmm.
But with the 2000s, it almost, you could do that. You could literally say that we're, because we've turned the page. So you could say that we're in the 20s right now.
We are. And that's what I was just going to say, because you and I are products of the 1900s. When we say the 20s, you and I both just assume we're talking about the 1920s, because most of our life, when we say the 20s, that's what we meant was the 1920s. It was just automatically understood. Well,
Yeah.
now, if we say, oh, back in 15, okay, was that 2015 or 1915?
Hmm.
You know?
That's why that's why it's good to. So um one thing that I've learned, I so unless you practice something, you don't acquire the habit of it.
Mhm.
Um, for better or worse, whatever that might be. But in the case of transmitting information on paper or via information, letters, text, whatever, story writing,
Mhm.
genealogy, like what I'm doing. If it wasn't for me to actually sitting down um, with the genealogy, I used to shorthand a lot of concepts, and I still do. I
Mhm.
admit a lot. What I've found by doing the genie. So before, like on Facebook, I would write little things about my thoughts, and if I looked in the past, my thoughts were ridiculous. I mean, I was trying to say something in certain occasions that I might have thought were clever, or just little spouts, little moments of a thought.
Mhm.
But I was not disciplined enough to sit down and think it through proper and say, well, what am I actually transmitting here? What is the actual
Yeah.
thought? And sometimes I most of the times I screw up anyhow. But the point is this: due to the discipline of writing complete like dates
Hmm.
and information to point, this person is this person and this is the date in which
Hmm.
this person was born. Now this person was married to this person, and they were that has kind of trained me to be a little bit more thorough with the things that I write, because I'm thinking, even now, like if I write something to you, I could miss information, and then you just have this received package of
Yeah.
half
What did he
inf-
mean with this? Yeah.
right, and it still happens. But the point is that if you were to stretch this out into the distant future, and anything that you leave written down now,
Hmm.
like those books that your ancestors wrote and took the time to sit and write, depending on the volume itself, any information in there that was shorthanded from a longer story or recapped, all the all the recapping remains with you to this day. But
Hmm.
all the stuff left on the cutting room floor that
Right.
would be interesting, things that the person writing would have thought was mundane at the time,
Yeah.
if they would have left it included, it would probably be something earth shattering. Even though it's something so simple and day to day, it would bring meaning to you, let's say,
Hmm.
in this case. And so I'm thinking, in the future, depending on what we write, the thick of it might be completely misunderstood to a certain degree.
Absolutely, because the vocabulary changes as well. I mean, you and I can sit here and talk back and forth and understand each other absolutely perfectly, but go back and read something that was written in the 1800s. It's
Hmm.
a completely different style of writing. The
Yeah.
words meant different things. Even in the early 1900s. Um, well, a good example is, I'll just say it, intercourse.
Hmm.
Back then, it meant a discussion or a conversation back and forth between people. Now it has a different meaning altogether. It
Hmm.
always meant that as well, but it wasn't used that way. It was used as a discussion. You
Right.
know, there are many others. There are many other examples of that, but that one is one that I can say and still be PG-13.
There's it's still, at least so in context for me, I've read a few 1800s books
Hmm.
in the context of the things that I'm studying, and
Right.
in English, not in
Mhm.
Spanish. In Spanish,
Right.
I've focused mainly on acquiring data
Hmm.
plus extra information, but not in book form.
Hmm.
It's still a bit of a thing, but I could do it at this point. I don't
Hmm.
know my attention span, because it's difficult to rewire your thinking.
Hmm.
Like when I post stuff on Facebook in Spanish,
Hmm.
because I don't know if you've noticed, but I've started to do that more and more, where I write complete, like, little mini, let's say, biographies or little histories in
Hmm.
Spanish, and I do that for my Spanish family members that are on there,
Yeah.
that perhaps are in Cuba or this or that, because I'm trying to share that information. Although Facebook translates it for them, I've noticed that some translations don't work well, and
Hmm.
so I've spent a lot of time going to the Google Translate
Hmm.
and seeing what it does with the things I'm saying in one language and another. And for the most part, it works. But when you get very intricate, or when
Hmm.
you have a clever little swing on things, like a
Hmm.
little hook around, um, it could be a problem. It could derail
Yeah.
the thing. So I find that, but I have read 1800s books in English,
Hmm.
and for the most part, for me, it's perfectly understandable.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you do notice the difference in vocabulary. Some words were used different, and some words are just archaic. We don't use them anymore. You can pick out the meaning of the sentence or the paragraph, but the specific word, there's still a little bit of a huh there. I've had to look a bunch of stuff up because I grasped the concept, but I didn't know specifically what they meant by using that word. And then it becomes a matter of, well, why did they use that word? Why didn't they just say this? And then it's like, well, because the language evolved over time. Oh, okay. Well, I get it now. But I do so love to have these little discussions with myself when I'm reading.
I started reading a book that was written in a prison during the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
um, from a, uh, a Union soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the reason I was reading this particular thing is because the Union soldier was Federico Cavada, or Federico Fernandez Cavada, one of the two. And Federico was born in Cuba to a Spanish father, and I think either some sort of either French or something mother. But the point is that his father was from Santander. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know it at the time, but I was studying Spanish activity or Spanish participation in American history, United States American history.
Yeah.
And I found plenty of things that are I
Mm-hmm.
guess slightly side roads in the mainstream conscious. But
Sure.
he got captured, and he did Gettysburg. I mean, the guy was everywhere, and he was a lieutenant colonel, and he ended
Gosh.
up in Libby prison,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote his experience in life and this and that. He used to go up on balloons and scout enemy lines, and
Mm-hmm.
then draw them, and then he'd come back and he did all that kind of stuff, and he wrote his book. And so I opened up and started reading it because I wanted to look through the history so I can do a video, which I did do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the introduction, you know whose name is in there?
Hmm.
Mateo Escajedo
Oh,
Salmon,
geez. Yeah, your uncle.
my great granduncle,
Wow.
is in that book. But my great granduncle wasn't born. He was born in the latter 1800s, but yet he's in the book. And the reason he's in the book, and it's called My Life in Libby Prison, or Libby Life. It's called Libby Life. It can be found for free in the
Mm-hmm.
Internet Archives. And
Okay.
the reason he's in the book is in the updated version. I don't know that it was ever released proper
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, but in this updated version, this new release or whatever, um, they talk about his parents' past, and in order to find all that out, they had to go to the source. And Mateo Escajedo Salmon, my
Mm-hmm.
great granduncle, was the authority
Mm-hmm.
for his era in the history across the board of Spain and the Americas. He wrote
Mm-hmm.
dozens and dozens of genealogy books and whatnot. So he appeared there. And I was like, holy crap. Like, he appears when it comes to Spanish history and this and that, he appears a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy crap. But I never finished the book. I just saw that, and it took my brain in different directions. I started looking at other things.
That's
But
part of the problem with doing that kind of research, is because something shiny is going to catch your eye and you're off on another tangent.
yeah,
That's why it's very hard to do and very time consuming,
yeah,
because
it
it
is.
may take you a month to get back to that original thought that you had and go, oh yeah, let me finish this.
And sometimes you forget.
Mhm.
The problem with all this is that you have rabbit holes, and because there's too much to study about history, and it's never going to be complete and stuff. And in fact,
Well,
and you forget most of the things you read because it's
well,
just too many sharp corners and alleyways.
well, not only that, but there is so much to collate and go through,
Hmm.
and there is so much more being added every day. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of these records that you're going through, excuse me, a lot of these records that you're going through now weren't digitized 2 or 3 years ago. So new stuff is being added all the time,
Yeah.
as it's made available and
Public.
made public. And certain time spans have to pass before certain things are allowed to go public. I mean, we I don't think the census records from the 60s are here in the US are public yet.
No,
I,
they have to wait.
yeah, they have to wait a certain amount of time. I think the 50s it just went available to the public. But
Was it the 50s?
I think so. I think it was the 50s that just went public last year. I may be wrong, but I think so. But it doesn't help me because I've already tracked my family back further back than that, so it didn't affect me one way or the other. But Yeah, but still, the amount of information that has not yet been digitized, there's still more that is not available online than there is that is available online. And that varies by country to country and even state to state. Because, like in the case of the state of Missouri, before I want to say it was either the late 1800s or the early 1900s, somebody died, the state didn't care. They didn't need to know it. There was no death certificate. There was no, you didn't even notify anybody. You just buried them in place and that was it. So as a result, a lot of death notices, unless it was printed in a newspaper, that just, people died, they just disappeared. So, that's one of my roadblocks is we don't know exactly when my 4 times great grandfather passed away because he died in Missouri. All we know is he's in one census in Missouri, and then the next census 10 years later, his wife is back in Indiana, and he's listed nowhere. So
Was
he
he
died
what,
somewhere in between
what
those two.
was he pre-Civil War?
Um, I believe so. I'd have to look. I believe it was before the Civil War. I want to say it was between 1850 and 1860, but I may be wrong. It may have been between 1860 and 1870. But I
Because
want to say 1850,
if it was
1860.
pre-Civil War or even Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
but especially pre-Civil War, when I'm roughing this,
Mm-hmm.
when the states started to the territories started to become states further
Mm-hmm.
west, Missouri was a sore point
Oh, yeah.
in
Oh, yeah.
in in the history because if another state went to be a slave state or a free state, it would tilt the balance of power in
Right.
Washington. And so, according to what I've read, a lot of people, when they had to vote, oh, and each new territory that would become a state would vote for whether they're going to be a free state or not.
All right.
And I think that what happened in Missouri is that people flooded the area from both sides to try to get the upper hand on whether it would be a free state or not. I don't know if it became a free state or if it was the other way around, but they flooded there. So that's an interesting historical thing that might be at least a side road of what he was experiencing around him,
Mm-hmm.
that he may or may not have participated in.
Yeah, I really have no way of knowing. I know the area that they lived in. I know the township that they lived in, and it's way out in the middle of nowhere.
You've shown it
Even
to me
even
before.
today, I mean, it is desolate out there. We're talking like 3 buildings,
Yeah.
and because it's all farmland basically, but it experiences annual floods on the Mississippi River. So, or no, that's not the Mississippi. I'm talking about Missouri River. Um, there, my wife just she must be looking it up. If you're talking about James Lindsay, I was. He died before the Civil War. Okay, David is the one who lived during the war. Yes, yes, I knew his son did, but I couldn't remember if James died before or during. So okay.
So there was that. People were rushing into territories
Mm-hmm.
in order to vote because they wanted the thing tilted one way or the other. And then Texas became a slave state, and so did Florida because they
Mm-hmm.
came into the picture. And then all hell broke loose
Yeah,
because it just wasn't
yeah.
acceptable for the brand new Republicans. And um, the history, it's funny too, because on both sides of that event, um, countless Americans can I mean, there's countless Americans that have come after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
that have installed themselves. I mean, from all sorts, but countless Americans can trace their roots to any number of soldiers, not only from the
Mm-hmm.
Civil War, but 1812, the Revolutionary
Revolutionary. Yeah.
War, um, and I can't do those things because, just simply put, my family arrived in the 1960s. I mean, just my
Hmm.
direct family, simply put,
Hmm.
just arrived in the 1960s. So I can't do that. But what's interesting is that due to the fact that Spanish people have always been here,
Hmm.
um, more so than I thought before I started studying, there's ancestors that are linked to the ones back in Europe that were wandering around here. So they would probably be some sort of cousin twice or five times, 10 times, you know, who knows what the case is. But the DNA appears in American people,
Hmm.
United States citizens that have long records or long histories here that I'm related to because of some who knows what 1700s DNA ancestor we both share. Um,
Yeah.
and I can't crack that thing. But well, needless to say, the Americas is wild. This is the epitome of, even though we have quite the comfort with air conditioner and this and that, but this has been a wild ride on this hemisphere.
Oh
Wild.
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Big
Yeah,
time.
yeah, this has
I
been
mean,
wild.
well, and people immigrate. People go all over the place for various reasons. My ancestors came west in the 1860s basically for a fresh start.
Yeah,
And David was very well versed in land patents, and how to file claims and this, that, and the other, and came out when it was the Oregon Territory. He was here before it was before it became a state, and then as it became a state. And they just basically wanted a fresh start. They wanted to get away from everything and everybody and be self-reliant and self-sufficient. And from all indications, they were exactly that: self-reliant and self-sufficient.
it's an amazing journey. I mean, it's a very American a journey. It's a very historical. It's a participation that you belong to through your ancestors that has been handed down to you. That is really an amazing story. I mean, everybody has amazing stories when you look back
Mhm.
because we have so many ancestors.
Yeah.
A lot of people. I'm going to throw this a slightly um, controversial, but I don't think it's controversial, but it is.
Okay.
A lot of people, when they do their DNA tests and so on, especially when they don't have a lot of, and you can't blame them. We don't blame. I mean, we're all human beings, and
Hmm.
it's not like we have all the knowledge. You search out what you're interested in.
Sure.
But a lot of people will get like their results, and they'll say, "Oh, look, I'm all British." Or
Hmm.
mostly British, like they'll see like British or maybe
Hmm.
like some sort of Scandinavian thing. It's just how boring. I thought I was gonna have something exciting. I don't know if you've run across those videos, but I
Yeah.
have a lot. And
Hmm.
every time I see that, I get sort of like that cringe going up the back of my spine because it's like the history
Hmm.
that entails
Yeah.
in and of itself
Yeah.
is exponential.
Hmm. Yeah.
But
There's a
since they don't have um you know what I'm saying, like
Yeah.
the foundation of a little bit of historical, they just think it's just some sort of like just like it's like they a big bowl that's sort of a cookie
Yeah.
dough,
Well,
and,
I mean,
and that's it.
there's well over 1100 years of history just there in the British Isles that's documented, that they know of. And they're
And
discovering new stuff every day,
yeah, it's
you
ancient.
know? So, and the battles that went on there and the political intrigues that went on there, and are you of this house and are you of that house? And, the War of the Roses. And I mean, you name it. I mean, all of the different waves of the Vikings, the Viking raids, and then, here comes William the Conqueror and the Battle of Hastings and all this other. I mean, to say, well, yeah, boringly British. Well, for pretty much a millennia, it was anything but boring. There
It was
was, I
still
mean,
not. It wasn't even boring in the 60s.
yeah.
You had, I mean, we're modern now, but you
Hmm.
have the revolution of music. I mean, well, we're talking also throughout the 1900s. It just it was continuous. There's
Mhm.
always stuff there, but people, I don't know. It's like it because they don't have the foundation or the expert. They haven't spread their wings
Right.
necessarily on the topic. But I do see that a
Well,
lot.
a lot of people just don't care too. You have to take into that,
A
you
lot of people
know,
don't care.
they
That's
just
so
really
true.
don't give a darn where they came from. They, I can't do anything about that, so it doesn't interest me. Well, okay, fine, great.
No, and they have perfect right to do so. I
Sure.
because I mean it's not what they're. I mean if they're into rock collecting and they don't have time for whatever they don't have time
Hmm.
for, they're doing rock collecting and that makes them happy, and
Sure.
so be it. So it's kind of that
But
sort of thing.
I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. I've always been the kind of guy who, when Grandpa would tell stories, or my great grandfather and my great grandmother would tell stories, I was interested. I wanted to know what it was like. I asked my great grandmother on my dad's side what it was like to come out west in a wagon because she did it. She was a little girl, but she did it. And that fascinated me because, I'm sitting there watching Bonanza on TV. She lived that.
Exactly.
She was a little girl in that wagon.
I'm sure people in that wagon during the
Hmm.
time, as an
Yeah.
example, were thinking, "Oh, great, we're in a freaking wagon. Let's hope
Mhm.
we get there in time." But for us, looking back, it's like it's an adventure. But for them, them trying to get from A to B. I'm sure
Yeah.
to a degree, they're not like just sitting there and thinking we're going to be in the Wild West in the future, or designated as
Yeah.
such. They're not thinking in terms of it's us looking back and really, and it should be there in a
Hmm.
sense. We have talked about in the past. It's a difficult thing because we have talked about in the past our view back, especially through movies and so on. It's not quite the story. It's
Yeah.
a version of it that's been glitterified
Hmm.
and sort of like it's funny because even though it's not accurate, there's something warming about the movie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Even though it's not accurate, there's something.
Well, and that's why I spent so much time listening whenever they were talking. It wasn't sitting down with me on Grandpa's knee and Grandpa telling me what it was like in the good old days, nothing like that. But whenever you get adults together, they're gonna talk. And I was that weird kid that sat back in the corner and I listened to what they were talking about. That doesn't mean I was interested in everything they were saying, but when they got into stories, my grandfather talking about taking his first week's pay, which was 50 cents, and he went into town and bought a new pair of coveralls with that 50 cents. That meant something to me. Even as a
Yeah.
little kid, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, you could get a set of coveralls for 50 cents. I didn't say it, but I'm thinking it. And you worked a whole week and all you got was 50 cents, not realizing that to him, that 50 cents would be the same thing as $20 to us now,
There's an
20,
inflation
30,
calculator.
$40.
What,
So,
what year? What year was that?
oh, I don't remember. He was born in 1906. So, I mean, you
Oh,
can
okay.
go from there. I don't
I was gonna
remember
type
what
in the
year it was.
inflation, but anybody could do that. So
Yeah, he was, you know, he was born in Oklahoma and
we're
spent
being taken for a ride today. I'll tell you
a
that.
good portion of his time there in Oklahoma and Texas before he came out to Oregon. In I think he said he came out to Oregon in the 30s. So and they met my grandmother in the 50s. But it was a weird time, and he was my step grandfather, by the way, just in case anybody's sitting there trying to do the math. Yeah, I was born in 61, and they got married in 53 or 54. I don't remember which, something like that. He was my step grandfather. My real grandfather passed away, well, quite young, in 1951, I believe. But so, but listening to him tell stories about what it was like back then, living in a shack with a dirt floor. And I'm like, wow, that must have been messy. He said, nope, mom had that floor so clean, it never shined like glass, but you could eat off it. She kept that house clean. And I'm like, wow, okay, all right, fine. But I was always interested in that kind of stuff because, and I liked, he's the one that got me into woodworking, by the way. This is on my mother's side. Um, the stories he told and the things he taught me, I almost always learned something from just listening to him and just, you know, out there in the garage watching him do something, watching him sharpen a saw. And I'm talking about just a rip saw or even a crosscut saw. He'd get the file and he'd get going, and he had a, a, a saw tooth set. And he'd bend the, and I'm like, well, what do you do that for? He said, well, this clears out the dust. And so you bend it a little bit over this way. And he explained what he was doing. And I learned more from watching that man just putter around in the garage than I think I did in any school, because he taught me a practical application for a lot of things that I was learning in school. You know, he taught me how to read a tape measure. And I never once complained about learning how to add, subtract, multiply, or divide fractions after that, because I saw there was a real world application for that. You know, so, and it became real easy to do certain calculations in my head because he taught me that kind of thing. You know, but he also, that's a double-edged sword, because I can remember arguing with one teacher about um, you take a 2 foot long board and two cut it into two pieces, cut it in half. What have you got? And she was looking for two 12-inch pieces. And I'm like, that's impossible. You can't do it. One of them's going to be short. You can have one 12-inch piece, but your saw blade has a curve because it removes material. So one of them is going to be short. It's not going to be a foot long. She's like, you know exactly what I mean. And I'm like, no, it's real. You can't do it. I'll hand you boards all day long. You're not going to get two 1-foot boards out of a 2-footer.
You know what would have been almost as good? You, when she asked you the question, you could have busted out with, nothing from nothing leaves nothing.
It was, and I wasn't trying to be argumentative. It's just I was taught something, and now I got a teacher trying to tell me something else, and it's like, no, you're wrong. That's not going to happen. You know, it was just, and that's when I started questioning authority. I really did. Just because somebody taller than you says something doesn't necessarily mean it's so. You know.
Yeah, chances are. Chances are.
I'm like, well, sawdust comes from somewhere. It's taking something out of there. You're just not going to get it.
I have a theory that's not to be taken lightly, but it's not to be taken serious. It's just meant to be on your cockpit, one of the little lights on the cockpit that you use to navigate through the sky. And that is, which I'm sure you have a version of it, because it's called the bull detector. If you're looking for the word that I coughed in,
I think I get it.
you won't get any of this, so just skip the whole podcast.
Yeah.
So one of them is that I have a strong, like you said, a questioning authority. I have that was all of a sudden.
Sorry, yeah, it snuck up on me when I wasn't looking.
that was a wild
yeah.
Sounded like a Mustang busting out of a corral.
That was me trying to get to the mute button before I exploded.
You held it, and as you were reaching, you couldn't. It sounded like the wooden, the not even. It sounded like wooden gates busting open and a freaking El Toro coming out. Is the okay? I'm gonna say it like this. It's gonna be a little bit too aggressive, but it's one of the detectors on the dashboard.
Okay.
Everything is snake oil. Everything is a wagon on the side of the road. Everything is a wagon on the side of the road with the intent of parting you from your shekels, or extracting some other important thing from you, such as your attention or your. Everything is extraction. That's one of the little beings. So anything I look at, even if it's a great deal, and I know you can't live your life like this, but it's one of the little beakers. There's always that little light in the back of my head going, nini, 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 nini. And I'll just say it like that. To include, to include all levels of society, including the ultimate controllers of nations and principalities and so on.
I'm not that cynical because I believe that there is a time and a place for everything. If you need a screwdriver, you need a screwdriver.
I spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time explaining that it was one of the beakers for you to go ahead.
But
I mean, I think that there are.
Yeah, I believe there's a time and a place for everything. But I do believe that there are some people who live their lives that way, that they're always out to just get something from somebody else. So, but there are also entire industries that rely on the misfortune of others. Think about the people that make prosthetic limbs. They make their living. They rely on people to have accidents or be born without a hand or without a part of an arm or something like that. That's where their livelihood comes from. They're not bad people. They're not bad people at all. They're out to try to help people function in society.
Well, there's two things to that. One,
but their living relies on in other words, they need people to have missing limbs.
I get it. But there's two things to that. Mm-hmm. One is that yes, they are relying on that, but you could also switch that around and say, well, they found a need that they're filling, and in order to create the product, they need to, and plus they need to feed their family. But that would be different. There's two things. That was the one thing. The other thing would be different. I think it would be different if they were actively cutting people's
and that's why I say they're not bad people. They are trying to help folks. Ambulance drivers, if people didn't have accidents, they wouldn't be needed. So a lot of this is based on really how you look at things. If people behaved better, there would be fewer lawyers because there wouldn't be a need for them.
Well, you can also make the argument. So look, that same argument. So there, I could be very explicit with the thing, but just I was general with it in order not to get into.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not trying to be specific either.
You said, what was the last one you said? You said a scenario you just said?
Well, if people behaved better, there wouldn't be the need for so many lawyers. So that what I'm getting at is because people behave badly, we have an entire industry that is geared to that. Now they're not bad people. They're there. You have a right to a defense when you're accused of something. And that's their job, is to do the best they can to defend you. They're not bad people. But if everybody behaved better, they would be unnecessary, is what I'm getting at, see?
Yeah, there's always, there is a good and bad side, or you could say yin and yang. Like, let's say, if you're an agency that is dedicated to taking from one group of people and installing it in others, and during the transfer, pocketing it for your agency to a degree, and then transferring it.
Oh, sure.
You are providing a very great service for those people that are receiving said money. Not so much for the people that are being extracted it. So there is an element of these people are being favored by this entity, whilst these people are sort of like getting
punished. Yeah, they're being punished by that same entity.
So you could say that certain people would say, man, yeah, that agency's great. Look at us and the other.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's all your point of view. It's all on your point of view. Rick French says, I worked for 23 years in emergency management. Most of my career was based on others having a very bad day. Yeah. If your job is to go out and put out fires, your career was based on somebody having a bad day, their house catching on fire.
Yeah, that's the obvious thing. But what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between corralling someone
Mm-hmm.
in whatever industry. Let's
Oh,
say
yeah.
fires. Let's say you create there's a difference with you when independently of anything you're providing a service independently. Some fire exists and you go and snuff it out because that's your duty and therefore you get paid for that. That's a perfectly understandable thing. But it's another what I'm talking about
Is the people that light the fire.
is the people that light the fire and own the business and go and put out the fire and then claim they did you justice.
Mm-hmm. While pocketing the insurance money. Yeah.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm talking about that sort of scenario
Mm-hmm.
that I'm calling snake skin boots, snake oil wagon side road salesman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and that encompasses just about all forms of advertising. And make no mistake, every form of media we have ever had, everything revolves around advertising. That's its sole purpose. Every TV show you've ever watched, every movie you've ever watched, every song you have listened to is geared towards advertising.
And free
It's
samples.
it's all there to get you to buy it.
All it takes is one free sample of a Schneider's um, uh, pretzel
Mm-hmm.
for you to remember it for the rest of your life.
Well,
Because I bought myself, I hadn't bought one for a long time, and I was walking by the thing, and it caught the side of my eye, and I went with the little cart. I
mm-hmm.
almost toppled over. I stopped and I said, you know what? I could use and I grabbed the bag. Oh boy, those pretzels are freaking awesome. I ruined the bag in less than 2 days.
But you also remembered subliminally, whether you think so or not, you also remembered subliminally that those pretzels are salty and they're dry, and you're going to need something to drink with them. And I'll bet you bought something to drink the same day, didn't you?
Nope.
Nope. Or you already had it at home?
No, I just drink water. I've been drinking
Really?
water. Yeah, I haven't been drinking soda. The only time I have drunk soda is the odd occasion that because I have lost. We've talked about this, but it's fast food and this and that. But if I happen to buy some sort of burger in a crappy restaurant or a burger joint that I used to think was awesome, I'll drink a soda because that's what they offer. But I've
Mhm.
not drank. I mean, I've not drank. Actually, you know what? Wipe all that I just said because I just remembered. Go ahead and eliminate. I do drink water, but that day I did buy a tall boy of Budweiser, so I did
Yep.
do that.
See, there you go. And
I just remembered.
that's why bars and taverns have nuts and pretzels and chips on the bar for you.
And then I found myself at the rug store, and I picked up like 10 rugs, and then I saw another sign, and
Sign everywhere a sign. But
it,
that's why they have all that stuff there. It's subliminal. It's not that they're being nice. They don't care if you're well fed. It's all salty. That's going to make you buy more drinks. You're going to drink more. You sit there throwing Spanish peanuts down your throat, or popcorn, or pretzels, or potato chips. You're going to drink your beer faster and order another one. And they
is
know
there
that.
is there a difference between regular peanuts and Spanish peanuts?
Um, Spanish peanuts have the little skin still on them.
Mm,
They're smaller.
okay.
I don't know if they're a different variety, but they're very salty. They're not dry roasted. They're very salty. They're very oily, and they have the red skin on them. And they're itty bitty, teeny, about the size of your little finger nail.
Really?
They're small. Yeah.
It almost sounds like what are those little crunchy
Used to
gosh,
get them in. Used to come in a tin can, but now they come in a jar.
and they're small.
Mm-hmm. They're smaller than a regular peanut. They're more round than they are oblong.
Okay.
So,
You know what's good stuff though? That hard corn,
oh yeah, corn nuts.
corn nuts. Corn nuts are freaking great, dude.
It's toasted hominy.
It's
Most
not even
folks,
corn.
oh, it's corn, but hominy is corn that is soaked in lye,
Oh,
and it
really?
swells up, and the skin gets real, almost. It almost dissolves the skin. It swells up real big, and then it's rinsed. I mean, a million times and everything, and then corn nuts is just toasted hominy.
Man, they're freaking awesome.
Yeah, they are. They are. I
I love.
love corn nuts. I like hominy too. So
I love Publix chocolate and vanilla cake. I get that. They cut little slices and they
mhm.
put them in like a little stack thing.
Are we
So that
gonna
when
do
you
this again? We're
no, but
back on the goodies.
no, but when you turn your cart
Mhm.
and they're like little pyramids, it kind and you stop and you look at and I have had the strength internally,
Mhm.
and I have pushed through. But on
Mhm.
other occasions, I think to myself, life is short. Why push through? And I grab myself up.
Exactly.
But sometimes I'm like on that kick and I'm thinking, you know what? I have the willpower and I
Mhm.
leave it alone and I keep going, you know.
The only time I do that is when I know I've got at least 3 flavors of ice cream in the freezer at home.
Yeah.
We go on little binges, Linda and I do. There will be times where I just want a piece of cheesecake, and that's all there is to it. But I'm not going to ask her to bake a whole cheesecake just because I want a piece. So, I'll be wandering through the store. She's over in the produce section, and I'm kind of, looking around, what appeals to me, and I'm the bakery. Boom, zip. And then I start looking to see what's in there. Oh, they have cheesecake. I also like cheesecake. Maybe I should put one of these in the basket. And boom, off I go. But it could be anything. I mean, there have been times where I've been walking by and I swear a piece of chocolate cake just screams my name. And
Yeah.
then I got to go back and get it. So,
I mean, it is what it is, man. It's like temptation everywhere. So we
yeah.
get had. Hey, my
But
bull detector didn't work when I passed by the
by
tower
the
of
pretzels.
yeah,
Yeah. But that's okay because it's not like they're not
right,
forcing tar on you.
right,
You
exactly,
know,
exactly.
it's one of those cases of you're sitting there, you go, well, hey, I'm glad I grabbed that bag of pretzels because I could go for some pretzels right about now.
That's it. That's
You
it. So
know, and
yeah, so
so it's not like you got them, opened it up, took a bite out of it, and went, "This is disgusting. What the heck is this?" And nobody in a CEO in some office building is going, "Ha ha, Eloy bought the tar. All right,"
but but
So,
but make no mistake about it.
mhm,
The purpose of everything, and I'm not suggesting whether you have a need or not
mhm,
for it that's justified or not. None of my business concerning this particular point of outlook.
mhm,
Make no mistake about it. Everything
mhm.
from out your door out into the world is looking to extract from you a lot to do with the wallet and other things, but everything is
Sure.
looking to
Well,
extract from you.
sure, because they got to eat too. So they're looking to get my money, and I want to see what they have to trade for that money. And if my eye is on that cheesecake, then I think we can make a trade. And I don't see them as they are trying to get my money, but they're giving me something in return, even if it's just momentary pleasure of going, damn, that was good cheesecake.
Like I said, I agree. I'm not suggesting for the purpose of this the part of whether you're benefiting from it due
Hmm.
to your desire and this and that. The idea is though
Hmm.
just that
Yeah.
everything is
Hmm.
basically that an extraction of
Yeah.
resource from you in order to acquire things, and obviously that's a given,
Hmm.
but maybe a certain amount of people aren't realizing that it's quite effective.
Oh, it's very effective. And I'm a heavy duty participant. Only one cheesecake, Linda says. Well, I always bring you one home too. I never do that. The only things I ever bring home that I just bring back here and don't even offer to Linda are things that I know she doesn't like. So, you know, but if I'm in the mood for a cheesecake, I will grab her one too. So, And I mean the little slices, the little wedge. I don't mean a whole cheesecake.
You don't sit in front of the TV with like a full cheesecake right on your lap, like a
Oh
cheese
no,
wheel
no,
and a
no.
fork
Uh,
and
I,
spoon.
I can't say that I haven't wanted to, but even I have limits, you know. And I've also, Linda thinks I'm weird for this. I save things for later, you know, like if there's if I have 6 cookies, I'll have a couple now, and then I'll put a couple away for later on because I want those cookies later. I don't have to eat them now because I know
That they're there.
later on that night I'll go, dang, I could go for a cookie. And I'll get up and I'll come in and I'll get a cookie, maybe 2. But then I've got 2 more there. So I don't eat everything all at once. And she thinks I'm weird. You know, she made some pastries New Year's Eve. She made some pastries called flakies. And everybody that was in here was, she come in, she handed me the plate and everything. And you were all, oh man. She made enough that we had 6 each. I ate my last one last night. And she just thought that that was the weirdest thing in the world. How come you didn't eat all of them right then? No, what can I say? Yeah, there she is. No, I have no self-control. If I have a bag of M&Ms, I'll eat the whole bag in one go. Yeah. Where if I bring home a bag of, I'll put it to you this way. I bought a bag of those little Reese's Christmas trees. It's almost the same thing as a peanut butter cup, but in Christmas tree shape. I bought 2 bags of those, and they lasted me about 2.5 weeks. And because I'll have one, and okay, my chocolate fix, that's good. I'm done. And you know, come in the next day and oh, I forgot I had those, and grab it, and okay, maybe I'll have 2. Okay, I'll have 2, and that's good. I don't just sit there and pig out on them. And but that's a double-edged sword because sometimes I forget I have stuff, and then it's like, oh wow, I still have that. That can't be good. And throw it away.
There's people across the country and probably the world, but
mm-hmm.
for sure across the country because I have evidence for it
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube, that conserve or forget about in the back corners of their kitchen cabinets cans of spinach and pickled
Mm-hmm.
this and pickled that and soups and stews and
That's the one that gets me is
but
pickles.
like from like the 1960s, sometimes even like 30s.
Well, that's my question, and it has specifically from pickles. When do they go bad? Have you ever eaten the last pickle out of a jar that you didn't buy that week?
I don't remember. I buy pickles maybe once a year,
Mm-hmm.
if at that.
Have you ever eaten the last pickle out of the jar?
Sure.
You've never had that thing where you're digging into the back of the refrigerator and you go, oh, pickles. And you can't remember when you bought that jar.
Yeah.
So it's like, is it any good? Is it bad? How do you know? There's no visible signs. Nothing's growing out of anything. And it's
Then
like,
it's not bad, right?
well, I don't know. That's my point. At that point, I punt. I put it back in the fridge and I ignore it because I'm not going to be the first to experiment with it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's better not to eat something questionable.
Yeah, but I won't do that because I'm like, well, that's a waste of food to dump it out. But then again, there are some things like if you're digging in the back of the fridge and you find, 9-month-old bologna, it's bad. Or you find celery and you pick it up and it's limp, it's like, yeah, that's gone. You can throw that away.
Or you open and look in the back and you see a little gnome sitting there. Get away from me.
Yeah, really. Exactly. If you pull a bowl out and lift up the cellophane and it starts talking to you, it's probably gone off. Yeah. So
Hiya.
but you can't tell pickles. and olives or anything pickled, I just don't think it ever goes bad. But can you trust it? I don't know.
It depends on the circumstance. Your trust level will, if it's emergency, drought across
Hmm.
the nation in some dystopic future,
Hmm.
that pickled pickle is going to be the most
Okay.
succulent thing. This tastes like battery acid.
Yes. Let me ask you a question. If you can think of it off the top of your head, and I'm not saying go do any exploring, what do you think is the oldest thing in your fridge? I think the
I
just to kind of make just to make it easier on you, I think the oldest thing in our fridge is a bottle of hot sauce I bought about 2 years ago.
2 years.
Hmm.
If I look in the in the top area, in
Hmm.
one corner, I may find, you know, those frozen popsicle sticks,
Hmm.
and I can't tell you. I know for sure it wasn't last year, nor the year before, nor the one before that, nor the one before that, nor the one before that. I don't know when I bought that thing. I know I bought it at some point. It's still sitting there frozen,
Hmm.
and it's just ice and coloring or whatever, or
Yeah,
some
sugar
sugar,
water. Yeah.
but it's sitting there, and I don't touch it. I just look at it, and
won't throw that.
I don't know
Won't
why.
throw that son of a gun away.
I don't know why. I sit
Yeah.
there. Is it something deep and inside of us that says, survival? That item may one day rescue me, or it could be a cold compress for
Yeah,
some sort of.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, exactly. I need an ice pack that's exactly that size and shape.
so there's reasons, or maybe there's no reason at all. Maybe it's just like we ignore the crap out of it for the hell
Yeah,
of it.
yeah. I mean, I buy different hot sauces for different things. You got your Frank's Red Hot, which is your general all-purpose hot sauce. Then your Tabasco, just your Louisiana hot sauce. Then you have your uh, Mexican hot sauces. Then there's all kinds of different hot sauces that have different flavors for different foods and go with different things. But this one hot sauce, and I don't even remember what brand it is. I bought it. It's at least 2 years old. It's probably older than that, but it's at least 2 years old. And I didn't really like it, but I won't throw it away. And I don't know why that is. I should get up after we're done here and go throw it out because I'll never eat it and it'll just stay there. There's no sense in having it.
It's
You
just
know?
sitting there.
Yeah, it's just sitting there. And then there are other things like when we get down to 1 can of tomato sauce, she writes it on the list, and then when we go to the store, she buy a can of tomato sauce or 3 or 4 cans of tomato sauce. But what about stock rotation? Do we bring that oldest can up to the front and use it first? Or do we just shove it to the back and keep putting new cans up there? And when we see that same can, it's time to get more tomato sauce. I don't know how the kitchen works. And sometimes I don't want to know. But it's weird.
I'm telling you.
It is.
Sometimes things like we had some sort of like mercurochrome
Mm-hmm.
that was from like the 1960s, still sitting in
Mm-hmm.
the.
Yeah.
And there was one for like a throat sort of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
every time I get my throat would get, my dad's like, "Come here," and I knew what was gonna go down, and my dad would pull out the actual label
Mm-hmm.
was brown and withered.
Yeah.
And my dad, "Come here, son," and I'd be like, "Oh no," because it looked like in the cartoons, like with the poison and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd say, "Don't swallow." And then why? And he says, "So you can keep it there and stuff, and it's not good for you to swallow, so don't swallow it." And that, in my mind, registered as
Mm-hmm.
poison, poison, poison. And
Yeah.
here's my dad putting like my touching up my tonsils with this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it was some sort of I forget what the name was. Um,
It wasn't mercurochrome though,
Glycerin.
right?
It was some glycerin.
Okay. Well, glycerin isn't bad for you, but it probably didn't taste good.
It was metallic-y.
No, I don't know. Then I don't know.
It was metallic-y tasting, but we had that forever.
Yeah.
In fact, in fact, in fact, in fact.
Uh-oh. He's gonna go get it. So let me know out in the chat. What's the oldest thing you got in your fridge? Say, Greg says a squirrel hiding his nuts. I there's a little bit to that. I mean, it's I just don't. I don't want to eat the whole thing all at once, because I'd rather have some a little bit later on. But like
Here
I
it
said,
is.
it's a double-edged sword.
You see
Uh-oh.
that?
Yeah.
This is older than dirt. You see that label?
Uh-huh.
You see
Oh,
that liquid
kinda.
in there?
Yeah. Well, it might be mercurochrome. Can you read what it says on the label? I can't read it. It won't focus. What does it say?
Hold on.
I can't see. I can't see
Hold
what it
on.
says.
Hold on.
Probably in Spanish too. Something.
It did sharpen up before.
Glycerina. And I can't see what that said. I
Hold
can't.
on.
And
Hold
it's in
on.
Spanish.
Why can't it? Why won't it focus? Damn it! There.
Yo Dada?
That's it.
I don't know what that means. It's in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish.
That's it.
What does it mean?
I don't know. What do you think I am? You think I'm the representative? Here's the thing.
You're
I don't-
bilingual. I'm as white bread as they get.
I love what you just did there. I'm gonna check that out. Hold on.
Exactly my point. I don't read that, and if I did read it, I don't know what it means. Oh
So that was
man.
good. You said I don't know. I'm white bread. I'm not bilingual.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of the things that I'm. There's a concept, and it's part of the it's part of the culture, and it's not. It's something that's just been handed down,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something of the Americas. It's not nothing to do with the old world and this and that. The idea of, and you said I'm not trying to, although I'm vibing off of it. I'm not trying to suggest that you're thinking in terms of that, but I do want to mention that this is a cultural thing, and there's endless examples that somehow bilingualness or different languages other than, and in particular Spanish, has nothing to do with white. And
Well,
it's totally, and there's a reason
Nope.
for this.
Nope. I got to push back on this. There's a difference between white and white bread.
What do you mean?
White bread is just this side of cracker. Meaning I'm just ignorant in it. I don't know any other languages. I'm just plain white bread boring. It's white bread is the most bland thing you can imagine.
We talked about that.
Tasteless, it's just a filler, white bread. Nobody ever said, a loaf of Wonder Bread, that's going to be delicious. No, it's just there to hold whatever you put in the sandwich.
It has nothing to do with so, because there's a thing, or at least I guess that what you're saying is that when people say white bread, it
White
means
bread.
like white and bread, like baking bread.
Yes. White bread. It means bland, boring, and just kind of there.
Well, so that's interesting. So that I didn't even consider that. There's a thing that, which is where I jumped off on with that, where Spanish, as an example, is not considered, in a general sense, culturally beyond our control. That has nothing to do with whiteness or Europeanness. Or,
I know that.
That's a common thing where if you see someone and they speak Spanish, all of a sudden the idea of any connection to Europe is completely out the door, as an example. So that's kind of where I was going for. But I did separate you from the notion by saying this is a generalized thing. I didn't, I wasn't trying to corner your ass.
Okay. No. I understand that. White bread. This is from Oxford Dictionary. Informal North American means blandly conventional. Just nothing much.
Didn't we talk about that at the beginning of the show, or was it in the green room? When we talked about people's DNA results, was that in the green room?
I think it was in the green room. Yeah, it was in the green room. Okay, here we go. Linda looked it up. Means iodized glycerin.
Okay.
Google Translate to the rescue again. Okay. Yeah, exactly, Greg. As opposed to rye or pumpernickel, something with flavor or taste. Yeah. White bread is just blandly conventional.
Exactly. So, think about that.
That's me. I'm the poster child. You look up white bread, there's my picture.
Yeah, but conventional is it's such a so
boringly average.
So we were talking about that in the green room, and just for the folks here, it's interesting because I was mentioning to Mark. I don't know if we did it at the beginning of the show or if it was in the green room. Was it in the show?
No, that we were talking about DNA results and everything. Yeah, in
the green room,
and British and the battle. Some of it out here, some of it on in the green room.
Okay,
you were going through your tree.
Okay, so that part was in the green room, but well, either way, Mark and I were talking either in the green room at the beginning of this, and one of the things was in watching the DNA results of people online with British results or whatnot, or some sort of like Northwest Europe sort of thing. That if you guys see those, in many cases they say, "Oh, great, how boring! This is just so boring. It's just boring."
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what you're saying here in this scenario. And the argument I was making in the green room or here when we were doing it was that no, there's this whole history and it's more complicated than that. But it's like you were doing it now by saying that, which begs the question. It's not boring.
No, I was trying to put it in.
Dull.
Well, no, it's just blandly conventional, boringly average. It just kind of, yeah.
Okay, well, either way, there is that notion that I brought in as well, which was something different than what you were thinking about. But what I'm suggesting is not like it's conventional too. There's Spanish speakers if there's one thing that I've learned, which I had no concept of, broadly speaking, had little until I started. There's Spanish speakers everywhere, dude.
I know that. Oh yeah, I know that. Believe me,
I'm conventional. And it's like everywhere.
But see, in my brain, I don't equate being bilingual with that, because to me, it could be
anything.
That's a little bit more of that's a higher level there. To be able to, because I don't, to be able to speak and understand, have a conversation with people, in two different languages or more, is a big deal. Yeah, to me it is. To me it is, and it's it takes a special person, in my opinion, to be able to do that, because, and Lord knows I've tried. I mean, I can get okay. To where I can follow something, but I can't have a conversation.
No, I understand. You can pick up certain things. You were saying, well, I don't know what it says, but what does it say? And the thing is that so even though I am bilingual, but my level of efficiency, even though I don't know how I can justify properly, although it's true that there's certain things that I have no way of grasping in Spanish. It's not me divorcing myself from it, because I find it incredible and useful, and I study it for my thing. But since I used it for basic, I've told you this before, for basic things. So there's things. So even though he was putting that in my throat, I didn't know exactly what the nature of it was until
Yeah.
Linda wrote it. Now I never bothered even
Okay.
to look
Well,
at.
I figured you would have a better idea than I would, because I mean, I was LBS, lost
Yeah,
bigger than Stuttgart. So
but there is that
uh,
notion. There is that notion. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Steve Nealon, I'm bilingual. I speak American English and Jamie Page. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So do I. So maybe I am better than I thought.
But there is that notion, though. The idea, the concept that I brought up. It's I don't
Hmm.
think it's a
Yes.
secret that a lot of people, and I wasn't suggesting you did that, but what I did suggest that it's something in the culture that's just been passed down to all of us. It's an
Hmm.
all of us or nothing thing, where Spanish is, it just quite don't, it's quite not the same thing. Basically, a language infers a race of
Um,
people, and you can make an argument for it, but the point is that there is that notion, oh, Spanish, that has nothing to do with
well,
um
I think a lot of that depends on the region, because and I'll give you an example.
but is it
If
true though that you've heard that before, that or
I
you've
have
seen that idea?
I know that concept. I know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
personally think it's for me personally. I think it's the whole thing is a bunch of BS. I think that kind of an attitude is a bunch of BS, and I choose not to partake. Thank you very much. I believe people are people, and that's it.
you mean from people
But
that are non-Spanish speakers, let's say?
yeah, the ignorant ones.
Okay, I see.
But I think it's. I also think it's regional, because I'll give you an example. When you go into Miami, you hear people speaking Spanish all the time.
Yeah.
I go at certain places here, I hear people speaking Spanish all the time. I would never assume any of those people are Cuban.
Mm.
You would probably never assume any of those people were Mexican.
Where?
Anybody in Miami speaking Spanish that you run into on a daily basis. Out here, most folks would assume that people speaking Spanish are from Mexico.
Yeah, that's
There, most people would probably assume they were from Cuba, although, as you've said before, that is changing, because you have people coming from El Salvador and Ecuador and Dominican Republic, and
we've always
from
had a
all
certain
over.
amount, but the Cubans
Right,
were the anchor. They were
right,
the anchor group, let's say.
right. And out here, most folks would think, well, they're from Mexico. And that's getting to be less and less the automatic assumption out here, as people discover the good portion of the people that they thought were from Mexico were actually from Guatemala or El Salvador, for example.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and to a non-Spanish speaker, all Spanish sounds the same. It
Well,
you
you can't speak for all, or can you? Can you speak for all
in my
non-Spanish speakers?
in my experience, there may be exceptions to the rule, but in my
Is it a rule?
experience, in my experience, the Spanish spoken by somebody from Mexico, I cannot tell you any difference between the Spanish from Mexico and the Spanish from Guatemala versus the Spanish from Cuba. Now, a Spanish speaker would be able to tell you that difference, because I'm sure there's colloquialisms. There may be different accents. There may be different speech patterns. There may be a different rhythm. Hell, there may be a different volume, for all I know. But it in much the same way, non-English speakers, like some German friends we had over in Germany, they knew somebody from the South. They could tell somebody was from the South. They couldn't tell where. But all of the rest of Americans all sounded alike to them. Even though you and I, as American English speakers, we can tell the difference from somebody from the West Coast versus somebody from New York versus somebody from New England versus somebody from Canada.
Yeah,
There's little nuances there and
yeah.
differences.
If somebody were to, let's say, come up to me,
Hmm.
or let's say two people were speaking Italian,
Hmm.
and one Italian was from the north of Italy and the other one was from the south.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I'm assuming, I, unless there's some sort of tonal variation that's extreme, I
Mm-hmm.
could I could tell there might be a difference to some degree, maybe, but generally speaking, I couldn't make out any of it
Right.
because I just simply, I mean, although Spanish
The-
and Italian are rooted together due
I,
to Latin, it's the base is Latin, so both Spanish and I could
mhm.
understand pick up word like there's words that are completely on both ends of the spectrum, Spanish
Mhm.
or it's the same word because
Mhm.
it comes from the same root, let's say,
Okay.
but it's still another language. It's like
Mhm.
Romanian. There's
Yeah.
words that are, but it's still Romanian. So you're
Right.
not gonna. So yeah. So it would be confusing. But the idea that I was going at wasn't necessarily that you can make out. I guess your point is a good point because without any cultural information and frankly,
Exactly. With no cultural reference.
yeah, it is a good point what you're making. So you bundle up, you bundle it all up into one
Yeah.
uh, uh, glob. But I think that that's a good point. I think it's a true statement for a good amount of people. I
Mhm.
think it would be a good bet
Mhm.
what you're saying. So I
Mhm.
think that you're right. Um,
Well,
I will go ahead. Go ahead.
and I was going to say, and a lot of that is just simply because a lot of us don't know that there is a difference because we don't speak Spanish. We don't studied Spanish. We don't know that the Spanish they speak in Peru is different from the Spanish they speak in Puerto Rico. All we know is it's Spanish. We don't know the cultural differences.
Yeah, but who's we? Here's the thing. Let me
No,
explain this bit.
that is a broad generalization. I'm
Yeah, well,
talking
let me.
about I'm talking about the non-Spanish speakers that I have interacted with in my experience. And that's all
Let
that
me.
can ever be is anecdotal.
Well, let me explain this bit. I'm studying. I don't know how good this because this is so. My reckoning is the
Mhm.
following: we are inheritors of a culture, and I've mentioned this to you, and I've kept studying
Mhm.
the situation. It's just a historical note.
Mhm.
There's a difference between individuals and individual relationships and a historical
Mhm.
forwarding or wave throughout time
Mhm.
that creates complexities in the society at large that
Sure.
people adopt as the norms of the eras and this and that
Sure.
that progress on through history. So there's a big difference between individuals
Mhm.
and on a individual or personal level or whatnot, and then there's the historical
Mhm.
circumstances that bring us to where we're at, that contribute to our understanding
Okay.
on a general way. So, to me, according to what I've studied, there is something there, and it's not finished by any, to do with the Spanish being another world
Mhm.
compared to the English in terms of religion,
Mhm.
in terms of the language, like we spoke, and and in terms of territorial conquest, and in terms of enemies from the moment that the colonization of the Americas and slightly before, but no,
Mhm.
not slightly before, from the colonization forward, there was a divide and there was propaganda put, and so
Sure.
there's this thing in the Spanish world called the, I don't know if you've heard of it, and many in the English world, let's say broadly speaking, to include the United States or any other English, unless you're really into the study, there's a thing called the Black Legend. Have you heard
Mhm.
of it?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I've not heard that name.
Um, it's being studied. Books are being written about it.
Mhm.
History is being in the Spanish world, from Argentina to Spain itself.
Mhm.
Like, and I've stumbled upon it due to my constant nosiness in in all these things, and it started due to basically power and money, and the Spanish, at the time the Spanish crown had the Spanish Empire or the Habsburg Empire
Mhm.
that covered most of Europe to include the low countries, Flanders and so
Mhm.
on, which we talked about before. That was under. Spanish control.
Okay.
And what happened was that the Dutch began a propaganda campaign,
Mhm.
writing the Spanish. They mingle with the Arabs and the Jews, the Spanish, the this and that. They're now killing the natives, the Spanish that they will. So they were doing some sort of like kind of like what Hitler did with the Jews
Mhm.
in the 20th century. The propaganda
Mhm.
was based on that and the papacy. The Spanish are papal lovers and so on and so forth. The Spanish,
Mhm.
and so all that was transferred through. And by the way, there's written examples galore in
Mhm.
early American colonial documents, and the
Mhm.
Revolutionary War actually, um, at least in New York, but in it, there sparks were fired due to the acceptance of Catholicism in certain quarters of the colonies,
Mhm.
where these people that were Protestant did not believe, and flags were even
Yeah.
constructed were anti-papal. A
Mhm.
decree was made by the King of England at the time, and he said, "Yeah, we're going to allow these churches uh, Catholic," and the outrage was such, and that culminated with all sorts of other things that sparked the. So there was always an anti-Catholic, and in fact, it was so harsh
Mhm.
that even in the British Isles with
Mhm. Mhm.
the Irish were treated very poorly for a very long time, to the
Mhm.
point where the Irish fled to Spain proper, but also to any of the Canary Islands and so on. So there's this wave of occurrences where it's a separation of a degradation of Spanish
Mhm.
culture,
Mhm.
um, Spanish religion, Spanish conquest and power,
Mhm.
and it just so happened to be that Spanish control crashed, and at that moment it was going downhill. British
Was coming up. Yeah.
became the power, and so due to all those things, we are the inheritors to
Mhm.
whatever degree we may be regarding how much we've learned or have interest in it. We are the inheritors of like associating a lot of things,
Mhm.
um, and belittling a lot of things in terms of culture, while at the same time, Spanish culture, while at the same time, um, throughout the history of the United States, these people from the broader Spanish world that we can't decipher who's from where and where, because it was such a big place,
Mhm.
region.
Yeah.
They came into the broader American sphere and interbred and married and wove
Yeah.
themselves into the, and so it became that some of the very uh, people that have that history, unlike me, like me, I'm pretty much a direct. I'm the
Mhm.
first generation American, so none of this applies to me. Although I'm an observer, none of it applies to me because I'm the first generation American.
Mhm.
But there's people that settled here, and this became America when they were living in territories where your family went out
Mhm.
west and stuff. There were people there that were living there that simply just became Americans due to the
Yeah.
situation.
By default. Yeah.
Right. So it's so, but the religious, linguistic, political, and all those things have created assumptions that we take as a matter of fact till this day, because we don't think about it. It's just a matter of fact. Oh, that's look at the Mexican with the big hat, drunk on the side of the road, or this or that, and so we and that's just an example, which is kind of a harsh one, but in a general sense, and we all do. I grew up watching that too, so I would
Mhm.
say, oh look, that's um but it's part of a historical narrative going forward. And by the way, and the last sort of like stamp on it is a big one, and this is the biggest one. The Spanish absolutely, publicly, and legally married within different groups, let's say, be
Mhm.
it native, be it
Mhm.
African, be it Philippine, be it what. They,
Yeah.
in fact, to a point, encouraged it
Hmm.
and creating, groups of people and whatnot and this and that. So, and that was not palatable either to this. A lot of Irish people
Hmm.
actually fled even to Mexico.
Hmm.
There's stories on that I've come across. I haven't sat through all of them. There's too many, but they were treated poorly in the U.S. early
Oh
colonial,
yeah.
so poorly
Hmm.
as if they were not, you know,
Yeah. Irish need not apply.
yeah, that they actually took off for places like Mexico and this and that,
Hmm.
um, to name one would not. And so that's but it's weird because at the same time, America is made up of all these ethnicities, let's say, that have congealed into the American
Hmm.
today, which are different groups that have come into the thing. And but because of that, you know, um, you have the English world as a subconscious flow, and then you have the Spanish world as a subconscious flow, going. So I think that there's something there that I found interesting that I did not know until I started looking into it.
Well, I don't know any of the history about it. I had never heard of that. The Black Legend. I'd
The Black
never
Legend.
heard of that. Um, and I mean, I can't explain it. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to even comment on it. Really, all I know is it has no place in the modern world. I mean, I don't know. I have never understood a lot of that topic, a lot of that kind of discussion. In that, I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive. I've
Oh,
always,
this is all stuff that I've just learned in the past
yeah,
year and a half, and I've brought to you in little pieces in the
yeah.
background
I have I have never understood why people seek to divide people.
to conquer.
Well, no, I'm talking about just on a you and me day to day basis. You know,
Because we're the inheritors of ideas that are
I understand all that, but it is completely and totally irrelevant to life today. It's okay, you're of Spanish descent. I'm not. Big fat hairy deal. Be proud of being Spanish descent. I'm proud of the ancestors that I have of my descent and my roots and everything, but it doesn't change a damn thing between you and me. Is what
no,
I'm getting at.
yeah,
So
but
I don't know why people seek to divide. Well, yeah, but his parents were Cuban. So fucking what? Who
damn,
cares? I
yeah,
mean,
well,
I get tired of the attempt to divide people
yeah,
along any of those lines.
but here's the thing: we're the inheritors of
Mhm.
these concepts,
Right.
and the uncomfortable the uncomfortable part of it,
Hmm.
um, for me, and you could stamp it with a rubber stamp. I mean, there's just us
Sure.
watching this, but you could stamp it with a rubber stamp that if you follow the trail of just some of the cookies that have left
Hmm.
on the floor, you will find these. Of course, you're also going to find justifications through history. But remember,
Sure.
I started explaining this in terms of there's a historical thing or narrative
Hmm.
that took place, and there's individual
Yeah, I
during
get it.
during all of this, there were also Irish people that were quite welcomed by the colonials.
Hmm.
You understand? So
Yeah.
at the same time, there were Spanish people that did trade and married
Hmm.
into or amongst British and
Well,
Irish.
and
So
as you pointed out, there were many, many, many Spanish soldiers who fought
yes,
with,
with the British too.
mhm,
Did you
well, on
know?
both sides, yes.
Yeah, which is
During the
right.
Revolutionary War, with the
Well,
Civil War, with the War of 1812. I mean, yeah. So,
right. So, but here's the thing: the notions of the ultimate notion is that you have this enterprise
mhm,
and the people that follow that enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and you have this other enterprise that's not our enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and there are competitors, and we must
Well,
we
that,
must snuff them out.
and
We're
that's a
talking
bunch of
about
BS. Yeah, I know. We're
w-
talking
w-
about in history. Yeah.
well, no, we're talking about in history,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a big deal because that's actually the history of how
Okay.
things, in a general sense, started to
Yeah.
shape up in history. But we are the inheritors since we're under the flag of our
I
flag.
I understand that.
We inherit ideas that follow it,
Right.
that um, a lot of people do parse it out throughout history, but the general average individual accepts certain truisms of belittlement, or that group is, and we all do it to a degree or another throughout
Yeah.
history.
Well, my point is we need to stop.
It's kind of a difficult thing because um, I'm
Well,
not suggesting. So, like,
for
let's say I'm not suggesting. So, well, I'm suggesting just that. So, I'm an individual,
mm-hmm.
but I have ancestors. Like, let's say that like your ancestors, you go back to Scotland and you have
Mm-hmm.
a wonderful history. That's a beautiful thing, and I look at that and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's an incredible history. I I don't see it like, oh, well, that's your history. It's not my history. Well, screw that.
Yeah,
I
and
look at it as, however, that's on a personal, individual
mm-hmm.
level. Then there's this historical reckoning that has come down the pike, um, but that's a historical thing. We are just passengers on a train
Right.
in that. But if I wouldn't have stumbled upon it, and I stumbled upon it because of interactions we had in certain cases, and I said, well, let me explore that idea a little bit further. And I
Mm-hmm.
found, I forget the specifics, but in certain cases,
Yeah.
and it's just a historical thing, but it's not always painted the way,
Right.
we don't we assume a lot of things that aren't necessarily true. But like,
Oh, yeah, understood. But I mean, for instance, my thing is it needs to go by the wayside. Maybe, yes, there's historical context to it, and that's the way it used to be. But people also at one time believed that you should bathe only once a year. Well, thankfully for all of us, we've gotten rid of that notion, and we now at least try to do it once a day. Most of us. Some of us need to put a little bit more consideration into it, but that's on an individual level.
yeah,
Um, so times change, things change, people change. And this constant, almost pathological need to divide people. And I'm talking about amongst us. I'm not talking about those in the powers that be.
you mean amongst
I mean,
regular
I mean
citizens,
amongst us, just the regular folks.
right?
That needs to go away. That needs to go away. It really does, because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore who tried to conquer who, when, where, or what, because there's nothing we can do to change anything that's happened. And yes, that did shape the world we live in today, but we live in the world today. We don't live in the world of 400 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
I don't see any. Oh, go ahead.
so we as people need to cut the garbage, cut the crap, and stop trying to label one another and stop trying to divide people.
Yeah, I'm not saying it for people stopping or not stopping. I'm
Mhm.
saying it as, this is the stuff that I've learned.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
I,
I
I
understand that.
I don't feel I don't feel so it's weird. So I don't feel attached to it in terms of like, oh, well, that happened and therefore I'm pissed and
Yeah,
this and that. I see it as, oh,
I know
that
you don't.
happened, that sucked.
Hmm.
If I would have been in that situation, well, I would have probably thought this, and that.
Hmm.
But I don't look at it in terms of some sort of uh, I guess the only personal thing is that I've discovered information, and
Hmm.
I do. slightly active because it can get a little bit too much. But I slightly active try to promote histories and stories because I find them fascinating. I'm studying them, so on that level, so that maybe um, losing a little bit of my ignorance,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of my ignorance.
Yeah.
I share a little bit of that with people that maybe on a post or this or that,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that I'm ignorant.
Yeah.
You understand? So that's the only thing I say. Oh, that happened, but you can't also blame individuals for not knowing what they don't know, even if
Well,
what they
okay.
believe is a little bit. So look, for instance, I'll say this. Well, go ahead.
Not knowing what you don't know is one thing, but making the conscious decision to say, oh, no, you don't want to go to that place that's owned by people of this religion, let's say, or this culture. It's like, why not? What are you afraid of? Why
Yeah, but
not?
if they don't want to do it, so look,
If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. But
right?
I
Yeah.
mean, come up with a better reason than it's those people. Because
Oh
to me,
yeah,
that's not a legit reason.
but that's been handed down,
I
and
know it has.
there's bias in every. So like, it's not like the
Sure.
Spanish. So like, I'm not trying to paint the. I'm not trying to paint the. What I'm trying to explain is that there's this whole world is the Spanish world, which I'm studying, so it happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm aware of certain things that
Yeah,
I'm learning
sure.
that were traveling down the pike parallel,
Mm-hmm.
but also crossing each other,
Sure.
and that it's not portrayed precisely how it fairly should be in terms of what happened. And the reason it's not, to a degree, is that, well, number one, people can look for it in books and realize, but the reason it's not is because um, we are the inheritors of an English. I am as well, even though I
Mm-hmm.
am directly Spanish,
Yeah, I know.
even though, but remember, just the simple fact of being born here, just a first generation American, I received my education
Exactly where I was
handed.
going to go with that.
So in my mind, I
Mm-hmm.
have all the lessons that Americans should have since birth.
But now you're also starting to find facts on your own that you weren't taught.
Exactly.
And that's the other issue.
Right.
We have to be a lot of that stuff needs to go away in a lot of places. Labels are useful for certain things, but we use them too much and we try to divide too much. We'll figure out a way to divide people, and the
Which is,
powers that be are experts at it because that's how they retain power. But,
but it's
but
normal. It's normal, and because remember, we are. So look, I'm not denying that we're not tribal. Not only are we
yeah,
tribal, but
yes,
we're
I agree.
tribal within our tribe.
Right. But that doesn't mean that our tribes are enemies. You know what I
It
mean?
could mean that. It could mean that.
No, it could mean that historically they were enemies, but that
No, but
doesn't mean that we're enemies now.
no. On another, I'm saying
Hmm.
that generally speaking,
Hmm.
if you take America,
Hmm.
broadly speaking, that's one tribe. You've talked about
Sure.
this before in
Yeah.
terms of when something happens in America, regardless of where Americans are from with their variety or different
Hmm.
take on things, they all come together under the banner of America in order to defend that which they belong to,
Right.
which you've mentioned in the past.
Hmm.
But what I'm suggesting is that, yes, that's true, but
Hmm.
I'm saying that also within that broad umbrella,
Oh,
there's
sure.
localized
Yeah, sure. There's
tribal
infighting. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
tribal affiliations and whatnot, and it slices up to
Sure.
such meticulous. And I think that is um, a human. I mean, it's what
It is.
we've always done because it's self-preservation of
Hmm.
of our the closer and closer group. So yeah,
And I guess maybe I'm just addressing the people that would seek to divide people just for their own enjoyment. You know, I had an aunt that was that way. She was not happy unless somebody in the family was fighting with somebody else in the family, to the point that she would start the fight so she could sit back and watch it. And that, to me, that's just an evil person. You know, I don't wish anything bad on anybody, but when she passed, my period of mourning, that silence I just gave you was longer than my period of mourning when she was gone. I wasn't happy she was gone, but I
Yeah,
wasn't deeply saddened either because I just think she was a bad person.
yeah,
That was just my opinion.
yeah. That's a tough one.
I mean, she caused marriages to end,
Damn.
and she was that type of a person. And I had zero use for her. And if you were to add it all up from the time I was born until the time she died, I think maybe the total amount of time her and I spoke, you could put in less than an hour. I just avoided her like the plague. I just didn't like her at all. And she was my grandmother's sister. But
That's a tough one.
there are too many people out there that are like that, and that's, I guess, who I'm more talking about is
Yep.
the constant need for their own pleasure to try to divide people, try to find that weak spot, that one place where there's a disagreement, and get these people fighting with one another. we
Okay.
we really got to mellow out and knock it off.
Okay. So original, my original, um, I guess, concept
Mm-hmm.
was that we are inheritors of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and in a general sense, not talking about individual actors
Mm-hmm.
with certain, leanings that they might have
Mm-hmm.
to against other groups, under
Mm-hmm.
the category of whatever, be it religion,
Right.
be it race, or be it whatever the story might be. I was sort of pointing out that on a historical, we are the inheritors of a lot of things that we take at face value
Right.
through. We may think that these things are reality, um, and we've inherited, and
Mm-hmm.
we just simply, it's
Right.
reality. And so the idea is, for me, I've broken through. And by the way, if one is if one is a student of history proper, like
Mm-hmm.
accredited, and like people that do this for a living,
Mm-hmm.
they know the story because they're involved in that kind of thing. It's
Well,
us laymen, or me, a layman,
mm-hmm.
that if not for my curiosity, I would have no idea about Louisiana having,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are simple factoids that are historical, that I wouldn't have assumed. Oh, there was Spanish support for the revolution due to
Mm-hmm.
the Spanish being against the English. They helped the colonies. There was trade opportunities, and so, and like all these complications. You know, um, I wouldn't know, but a professional would know it. But the
Mm-hmm.
public at large, me, would not. So I'm
Yeah,
talking
because
about
it's not taught.
general, right? I'm just talking about general things that
Yeah.
are assumed,
Yeah.
that are not true, to include
And
racial things or whatever.
that too needs to knock it off. That too needs to go by the wayside. Because yes, it historically it happened.
We're not responsible for the things that are part of
No,
the culture that
but
have been fed to us
but we
as
are
individuals.
but we are responsible for our implementation of those things that have been taught to us. So if we carry it on, we're just as guilty as the people 200 years ago. That's what I'm getting at. You know, it's one thing to say this policy ended on this date in 1901. It's another thing to keep teaching it that that's the way it should be. That's the way it's always been. Well, no, that's not the way it's always been. We don't do that no more. You know.
We can't help but categorize.
Oh, I understood. And because, and we do it to ourselves. You know,
Yeah.
if you look around, you will see certain populations. Well, like here on the West Coast, certain populations of Asians tend to band together in certain areas. And that's why San Francisco has a Chinatown,
Yeah.
because they seek each other out where they have the same type of foods, the same type of churches or worship, the same language, the
Mm.
same cultural background. It's familiar, it's comfortable. And I mean, that's fine.
Mhm.
Um, so we do it to ourselves, but that
Cuba
doesn't,
had a Chinatown.
but just about every,
I mean, if you think
just,
about it,
just about every settlement, at least out west, had a Chinatown.
well, because that's totally normal. Like people
Mm-hmm,
gather with their family members or their
mm-hmm,
closer knits, and that's totally normal. And
mm-hmm,
I'm not talking about that necessarily because
mm-hmm.
within the country, there's always been these things. If I've
Yeah.
been watching
I
some
mean,
old, I'm dealing with these things by studying it and seeing the picture, and I'm
mm-hmm,
seeing America in a broader light.
mm-hmm.
You know, um, and but it's not a complete picture, and
Sure.
nor is it. But I'm not. I've learned inconsistencies,
Mm-hmm,
um, but they're not bad. You know what they are? They are individuals traveling through time in their respective eras, um, making decisions according to the things that they had available to them at the time. So
mm-hmm.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying here we are. There's all this back there, and I'm just sharing some of the bits
Sure.
badly. I'm not sharing it good, but the general idea that I did want to put forth is that there was an English world that was
Mm-hmm,
coming up.
mm-hmm,
There was a Spanish world that was on the decline.
mm-hmm,
And to reinforce that decline, the British socked it to them and doubled down. And the Dutch
mm-hmm,
were part of it. And they used religion. Number one, the English
mm-hmm.
separated
The
from
Catholic
the
Church. Yeah.
Catholic Church, and it was from that point on that things started to go south.
Yeah. Thank you, Henry. Yeah.
Yeah, it was from that point that things started to go south, and well,
Yeah.
the Irish didn't take well to it, and many others did
Well,
not.
that went well up into your lifetime. I
Yeah,
mean, bombings and assassinations and gunfire in the streets and everything, Catholic versus Protestant, right in the middle of town. That was all the way up into well into your lifetime.
yeah,
I think that finally stopped. I may be wrong, but I think
in
that
the
finally
'90s.
stopped in the, yeah, I was going to say the early to mid 90s.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but the 70s were a wild time all over the place. I mean, you had the Red Brigades in Italy, and you had, I mean, there was, revolutionaries everywhere. The Germanys were still divided, and there were a lot of defectors coming over, and there were also a lot of infiltrators coming over and stirring it up. It was, I mean, it was a wild time. And, when you're, I'm trying to remember who it was who was kidnapped. And to prove they had kidnapped, it was the son of somebody, and I don't remember who it was. To prove that they had him, they sent his ear to his parents. I mean, when you think about the barbarity of that kind of a situation, you have to wonder who's enemies and who isn't.
well,
But what I'm getting at is today, this day and age, a lot of that needs to go away. That it serves no purpose other
a
than
lot of what though? What specifically?
um,
Because that's a
racial,
broad.
economic, spiritual, religious um, anger, angst. The 70s and early 80s, you had, especially in Europe, you had communists and socialists trying to I mean, they were just terrorists. That's all you can say, with bombings and kidnappings and shootings and this, that, and the other,
Mm.
trying to overthrow governments and divide people. And that calmed down, but the anger and the animosity never did, really.
The
It's
origins,
still there.
the origins of all of this, I appear to be when the King of England
Mhm.
broke from the Catholic Church.
But my broader point in all of this is all of that. It's 100 years. It's hundreds of years later.
Mhm.
That needs to go away.
Yeah, but
It
what happened?
needs to go away.
But the problem is that by so doing so,
Mhm.
um, he reinforced Protestantism, and it was taking shape in Europe as well. And many people became the followers of it.
Mhm.
Um, and the Catholic Church was also a political force,
I understand that.
and there was that tug and pull. So what I'm saying is that that event gave birth, just like
Mhm.
a family tree gives birth, like,
Mhm.
to countless people, and those countless people take those lessons and those directives in a
Mhm.
even subliminal way down the pike. So
And
my generalized thing is this: the reason that people have certain ways of thinking here in terms of race politics, and I guess, I don't want to call it isolationism, or um, whatever extreme group, be it religious or not, or even colloquially or not colloquially, even within the United States, between the Protestant outlook versus a Catholic outlook. All these things are under the radar, but very real, that shaped everything forward to this
right.
point.
And
Um,
that's what I'm saying. It needs to go away. That
yeah,
happened hundreds of years ago, and it needs to go away. It needs to stop. Catholics and Protestants, there's no reason for them to be enemies. There is no reason. If they
you see
both,
it all. You see
if
it all the
the,
time.
I know that, and that's why I'm saying it needs to go away. If they both sides dig into their Bibles, they will see there is no reason for it. None.
I mean,
Other
aside,
than other than I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. So what?
well, a side note
Mhm.
on that, north of us.
Mhm.
I don't know the story completely, but since we have a couple of friends from up there, um, there was the British and the French, and French being the Catholic variation
Mhm.
in terms of those two different things. But the French did not push the Catholic. It was more the Catholic flag
Mhm.
lay with the Spanish due to the conquest of much
Mhm.
of the Americas,
Right.
and they erected countless churches and so on and so
Mhm.
forth. So it was kind of, a French person would disagree and say, no, the French, we have Catholic church, and they do. But the point is that the dominant spread of Catholicism in the New World, um, French included, but was the Spanish, and the
Yeah.
Portuguese had as well. But the point is, the Spanish was pretty prolific in that um, propagation, and it was very disagreeable to the Protestants of the
Mhm.
United States,
Right.
to the point where, like I said,
Yeah.
they I mean, there's some histories there
Yeah.
that are pretty savage, you
Oh
know.
yeah. No doubt. No doubt. But
So I think we're the inheritors of that. Let's
we
put it.
are the inheritors of that, and we need to end it with us. We need to end it with us. There's no reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, that. Do you think that's? I don't think that there's.
No, it's a pipe dream. It's not reasonable, but I mean, all it takes is one person to end that line of it. You know, all it takes is one person not teaching their kids that old hatred for it to stop with that person. You know, if I'm taught, for instance, let's just go an extreme case. If I'm taught segregation as a child, but I decide that that's wrong, I can end it with me. Just if I teach my kid that segregation is wrong, it ends with me, is what I'm getting at. And I'm just one guy. That's all I can do.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Mhm.
I wasn't taught any disregard for any group at all. Like,
Well, neither was I.
I never heard any disparaging thing about any group. one time I was very little, and my grandmother had I was accompanying her. I was very little to a Kmart variation we have here called Zayres,
Mm-hmm.
which is no longer operating, but it's somewhere in Little Havana.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy in front of my grandmother and I. And he turned around and he told my grandmother, you know, I this is me as a little kid observing the thing. He said something to my grandma. He said, he turned around. And he said, "So things are going real good in Cuba, aren't they?" And he's laughing. My grandmother said, "Expletive, expletive, you Mexican, da da da."
Mm-hmm.
And she turned around to me. She looked at me. She said, "You see, I'm paraphrasing." She said, "This, you see what this Mexican guy is saying, and this and that." She was part Italian, so she really played it
Mm-hmm.
up. Her
Mm-hmm.
hands were, and he was being this. He was basically trying to laugh at the circumstances of the Cuban community
Mm-hmm.
in the perhaps I was too young to even understand that, but perhaps it was due to the political differences that exist between those two countries because they're
Yeah.
totally two different countries
Yeah.
with totally two different types of people, but there is a shared history in terms of the
Sure.
broader, you know, world with religion and what it's just. But other than that, I never really.
Yeah.
And
In
to me,
fact,
that wasn't this. That was more of a defense strategy, not
yeah.
um, like
Right.
saying, "Hey, all these people are evil." There was nothing like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. In fact, I was taught just the opposite. My parents went out of the way to basically, you know, teach my brother and I both that people are people, and it stuck with me anyway. I don't know
Mhm.
about my brother. That people we're all basically the same under the skin. So, there nobody is your enemy. Just except on a personal level, obviously.
Mhm.
The bully on the playground is the bully on the playground, but that doesn't mean that everybody that looks like that bully is that way. Is
That's a
what I'm
hard
getting
thing to. That's a hard thing also to get over because a person can easily be traumatized.
at. Mm-hmm.
Let's say your home is invaded by X type of person of X type of cultural background.
Mm-hmm. Right.
A person, depending on their mental state, could develop an
And
anxiety,
uh,
and from there it could unfold that they now
but
distrust X.
but
And
even but
before you
even then,
disqualify it, you could do the same. It's like anything else that you have a bad experience with.
I get it. But even then, I mean, we had that guy come in here and uh, get in Linda's recliner and go to sleep one night, and we
Yeah.
called the cops and had him removed.
No.
Now, he had red hair and freckles, and I never saw his eyes. He had them closed, so for all I know, he was blue-eyed. That doesn't mean that Irish bastard. If I found out that he was of German descent, that wouldn't be, oh, those German sons of bitches. It wouldn't be anything like that. It would be that guy. I guess, I don't know. I was taught to take people on one.
I
And
wasn't
maybe
even.
I'm naive, but I was brought up in the 60s and early 70s that you deal with people one on one, and that's it.
I don't think it was even a consideration in the greater to see other than a political variation or some sort of cultural
And
thing to do with food or or political or whatnot. Other
uh,
than those sort of like critiques, um, it was unheard of, and I think broadly in the Cuban community it was unheard of. But I think that comes from I'm not. I never knew. I don't know, and I still don't have quite a handle on it. But I think I wasn't too keen on Catholic stuff,
mhm.
and I just simply I didn't
E-
like the little statues and um, but I
even though
think
you went to Catholic school.
even though I went to Catholic, well, they don't
Okay.
teach you that when you go to Catholic school, you go and you study.
Mhm.
Like it's studying, but under the
But I
tutelage
mean,
of,
you were around that all the, obviously it was there.
it was normal. No, it was a normal school.
Oh,
There
okay.
might have been certain little things, but it
Mhm.
wasn't like you're not going into a
Yeah, you
gilded
weren't in a
hall.
monastery. I get it.
Right. It was just a normal school, but it had certain, I don't even remember
Icons
them.
and what have you. Yeah.
Right. I can't even say that I remember. It was just like a regular, it wasn't some sort of monastery. Um, it was normal, except that you had nuns walking around as
Mhm.
your superiors,
Mhm.
but they didn't, it wasn't necessarily, like, it, that wasn't, it was, you were literally learning, but
Mhm.
yet under the, under the umbrella of the Catholic, church. But, um, I think that the teaching in terms of, I think there is a little bit more leeway in the Catholic world,
Mhm.
even though you hear things like the, what do you call it, the Inquisition and this and that.
Mhm.
I think there's a little bit more, be it native people marrying into like European people, or
Mhm.
be it on a historical note.
Yeah.
I think that there was much more of that, and that's the world that the Spanish created here in the Americas,
Yeah.
which is very unlike,
Yeah. A lot of Protestant sects were completely different. Yes, they wanted to convert the heathen horde, but they called them the heathen horde after all.
yeah,
So, well, anyway, um, I think a lot of that just needs to go away because I think we, the average populace, spend way too much time on it when there are so many other things in life. And that's what it comes down to me is it gets in the way of life. If I want to go to this particular Mexican store and buy something, I want to go explore, see what they got, and try something new that I don't find every day.
you don't want to feel like you're in some weird scenario. You want to feel like comfortable
Well,
and
yeah,
open to come and
yeah,
go.
I
And
want to just be, and I have never been treated anything but welcome when we go to those places. I don't speak Spanish.
Mhm.
I will make the attempt, and well, heck, we discovered that in Germany. If you make the attempt, you get a lot more respect in return because you tried. You're not going in there demanding that they automatically speak English.
yeah,
And I try to be respectful of everybody. So I think I see that as a sign of respect that you at least try.
it's a weird, thing.
I'm not good at it, but I try.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, whenever you go into a different cultural environment, that's different from your own, in a restaurant environment, they're always going to be very welcoming because, I mean, for goodness sakes, you're the
Well,
client in a
yeah,
general sense.
yeah, but you've never been into a store where it looked like the person behind the counter, you were just interrupting their day.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I have never been treated that way in any of the places I've ever been in. I've been treated that way in more 7-Elevens than I have in any taqueria or any, you know,
oh yeah, yeah. And
little
then
store or what have you.
if it's a brand store or if it's some out of the way thing, generally speaking, if
Mhm.
it's something where they want your service, they want you to come back, they're going to be
Mhm.
nice. But if it's
Yeah,
an employee and they're sick of life and stuff, they're like,
but
oh, great and stuff.
well, but they'll answer questions.
Yeah,
If you're not sure what something is, they'll explain it to you.
you know,
And,
Miami, my Mark, Miami, it really is different in many ways, and it's probably very different than California. This is such a melting pot
Mhm.
within the greater melting pot of the United States.
Mhm.
It really is hard for me to separate myself and look at it in a
Mhm.
um what do you call it, non-biased way, even though I try sometimes in little ways.
Mhm.
um I don't know that I can properly uh see from the outside in, because I'm here.
Mhm.
There's every single type of um variation of human being and culture
Mhm.
and food that you could possibly imagine here.
Mhm.
um and so it's not a monotone thing necessarily. I guess it goes back to that white bread thing that you were saying or
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
um Here it's more like bread sauce.
Yeah,
It's like
different dipping sauces. Yeah, there you go.
it's like sponged into some sort of concoction. Um, but nothing. I just wanted to open up that
Yeah,
I don't know that that it's we're the inheritors of history.
sure.
You know, I don't think that anybody that's not like you're
Well,
not Spanish. I don't think that people that are Spanish should throw uh their dirt on you in terms of like it's like if you carry the weight,
mhm.
even though we even though in a sense we all carry the weight of the past in a cultural way, we are not responsible. You are not responsible
Nope.
for any
But
action that even a related person of yours might have done or not.
but we are only responsible for our reaction to that history and how we handle that history.
Yeah.
Because we make history every day, whether we know it or not. We're making history right now. The way we talk to folks, the way we interact with folks, the decisions we make based on everything, where we buy our groceries, where we decide to go out to dinner tonight, which movie theater we decide to go to. We make decisions that shape our personal history
Hmm.
every day. And what people did 200 years ago to settle this valley and build up this community that I live in, I have inherited that, but I didn't shape it. I didn't cut down the trees to make the houses. I didn't clear the lands to make the house, even the house that I live in now. I didn't do any of this. I purchased it. So
Hmm.
in that respect, I am an inheritor.
Hmm.
All I can do is try to leave it in as good a condition as I can for the next person who's going to come along.
Yeah.
That's the best I can do,
Yeah.
So that's all I'm, getting at with that. And
Oh yeah.
it's how we react to that history. If I decide that I hate it and despise it and want to burn everything down, that's on me. And that's an unreasonable reaction. So
It's
that
not a
I'm
very useful.
responsible. That I'm responsible for. But I'm also responsible for if I just get on with life and I buy my groceries here and I go to that theater and I get gas over there. I mean, and that's the only decision making. Probably the extent to the decision making I make anymore is just,
Yeah.
hoping like heck I get 50,000 miles out of this set of tires. And can we move on to the next day, please? You know,
Well, just to one final thought, and if you have any other thing, just
I don't.
on a further note,
Hmm.
in terms of conquering and winners and losers in history and languages and this and
Hmm.
that, just further back in time, which is beyond our grasp right now, but it's quite searchable and the literature is out there
Hmm.
sufficient. Um, all of us were basic. All of our ancestors in Western Europe and throughout Europe, but let's say Western Europe, from Spain all the way up north to Germany and beyond, were basically conquered by people from further east that basically ended either by battle or by choice. I don't know. Nobody knows, but they came in, took the women, or the women had or they had preference over the women, and as a consequence, the majority of overwhelmingly the majority of Western Europeans are the sons of people that conquered from another land, and the original men of that land were done away with. The women stayed, but the
Hmm.
men, those original European men of West, were gone. So we're history of replacements and shifts and idea. Who
And
knows what they thought and how they would you know
at the end of the day, and at the end of our lives, none of this matters.
unless we wake up in some sort of like hall, huge throne room hall, where they say, "Did you read that book?"
it None of this matters. I mean, people will go on and on about how advanced the ancient Romans were. Well, yeah, but they're all dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
None of it matters.
It matters.
There's
It matters. It matters. It matters at the moment that you're looking at it.
Mhm.
Just like when,
at the moment you look, it
yeah,
matters for this house matters to me right now, but it may not matter to the next people that buy this lot.
exactly.
So,
Abraham Lincoln,
mhm.
once it ended, all that he had done, all the tyrants in history, they're all. Does it
Yeah,
matter?
they're all dead.
Yeah, but at the same time, let's not be so callous
No.
as to.
So let me uh, before we end, let me end with a shower thought because that was
We'll, we'll,
fun.
we'll leave you with the
We'll,
shower.
we'll leave you with a shower
A
thought.
cold shower thought.
And this one is kind of cold too. When you stop and think about it, every mirror you have ever bought in your life was used.
Mhm. Previously used.
You were never the first person to look in that mirror.
Maybe not, because some mirrors are packaged through machinery, like cars are. So maybe they're just put directly into the boxes.
But they were looked at by somebody on the line when they came out, and anything with flaws was pulled off and recycled.
Yeah.
Every mirror you have ever purchased is used when you buy it.
Yep. I think that's a good one. What do you think? We'll leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
All right. All right, guys. Listen, this was our big expo into 2023. As you know, we're here every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. And as you know, we talk about whatever tickles our fancy. I don't know if is that forget the tickling and the fancy.
Well, you tickle whatever fancy tickles your fancy.
We wanna thank you for hanging out. We also have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and you can catch our past episodes over there by pressing the Wayback Machine button. I think we have a few hundred episodes there, roughly thereabouts, that you can
180.
download. All right, I think that'll keep you busy for a little while and entertained. We also have a site over on Facebook, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook, and you can leave us your thoughts for shows, upcoming shows, and we also post a lot of photos and videos of the things that we talk about here on the show. We're also sponsored by
Harneil Media. You see him out here in the chat. Steve is one of the good ones. He's your buddy. He's your friend. Look, if you're wanting to create a web presence or increase your web presence, yeah, having a YouTube channel is great. Having social media is great. But the absolute best way to create legitimacy behind your name and your brand is having your own website. Steve Nealon can take care of you. Harneil Media will square you right away. So reach out to him. That's Steve at Harneil Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of Trampled Underfoot podcast.com.
All right. Well, listen, we're out of here. We'll catch you. There might be a little hangout in the green room later for those that are listening. We'll catch you next time. Be safe. Enjoy your first week in this year. I mean, it's the first week of the year. So do that which you enjoy safely. And, hopefully those are good things that you enjoy, positive things. Like, I could only imagine. I have nothing more to say.
That's probably best. Peace. Take care, y'all.